Hi everyone, thanks for coming. First of all, I just want to apologise, I've got a really loud voice, so sometimes loud voice and mic is a recipe for an absolute racket. I'm Stuart, I'm the video game manager in the certification and video game team at the British Film Institute. So we're the first point of contact for anyone who's looking to claim the tax relief for video game development. It's very much a two-stage process. So you come to us, you get a certificate that says, this is a British game, and then when you're doing your tax return, you take that certificate to HMRC and then you'll be able to claim some money back. So I'm going to kind of explain the process. Can I ask, first of all, has anyone claimed VGTR before? Is anyone planning to? I would say if you're making a game in the UK, you should be, claiming. I think there's a lot of kind of misconceptions. People think for some reason that they're not able to claim it. Pretty much, if you've got a company set up before you start making the game, that's one of the things I'll talk about, and you're making it in the UK, then there's no reason for you not to be claiming it, really. At the minute, we are working under a system called VGTR, which stands for Video Game Tax Relief. It's in a transition process in the minute to something called VGEC, Video Game Expenditure Credit. The principles are much the same, so I'll kind of explain the kind of slight differences. They're kind of pros and cons to either, and you can maybe have a think, okay, well, maybe this system would work better for my game, because we are in a transition period, you can kind of straddle both essentially, depending on your kind of development period. So one more thing I'd point out, we're quite a small department. There's only 4 of us in the group, so myself as manager and 3 analysts. So I think a lot of people get put off because they imagine it, this kind of faceless corporation that's going to be there to kind of rubber stamping your game, saying pass or fail, whether you get a certificate to claim tax relief. It's not like that at all. We're very approachable. We're always happy to talk about your project and how it could, be eligible, and kind of discuss and help you. We even have templates that you can use. I like to think that we're approachable. Okay, so first of all, why should you VGTR or VGEC? So the bottom line is it's worth money. It's money that's there from the government to help support the UK games industry. It's not like a limited pot or anything. It's there, as long as you're eligible, it's there for everyone. There's no minimum spend, there's no maximum spend in terms of how much the total budget of the game is. It's there for everyone, essentially, from the kind of one-man band up to the massive corporations. So what's it worth? So VGTR is the one that we're still kind of going under at the minute. It's 25% of your UK or EEA core expenditure incurred. And that is capped at 80%, so it actually works out about 20%. So for example, if your game is £100,000, you're going to get about £20,000 back from the government. It's completely worth doing. It's quite a chunk of money. VGEC is slightly different. It's actually a bit of an uplift. It's 25.5% of core expenditure. It's again capped at 80%. So it's not a massive uplift, but it's like half a percentage, but every penny counts. And it's also possible in some circumstances to secure loans against VGTR or VGEC. So we've got to remain impartial, so we can't recommend any banks or anything. But there are banks and companies out there who will loan you the tax relief money in advance, because the tax relief money you only get back after you've spent it, then you claim that percentage back. So there are companies that will loan against it, and some developers use it to kind of cash flow. So what's the qualifying criteria? So it's very similar for VGTR and VGEC. There's not a huge difference, I would say. So the first and the most important one, I would say, this is the thing that sometimes trips people up, is that the UK game development company needs to be within the UK corporation tax net, which it should be. And then also it needs to be incorporated before the beginning of full development. So this is what can sometimes trip people up, because they'll start working on a game and think, oh, this is great. Then they'll set the company up kind of halfway through development, but it's too late by then. The reason for that is the company needs to be in control of the entire game from beginning to finish. And if it's set up halfway through, HMRC wouldn't consider it in control of the entire game. However, HMRC are a bit flexible on this. So if you're just kind of doing prototyping or early kind of concept work, just trying to get stuff ready to decide what the kind of full development is going to be, what the full game will be, And generally, they kind of are okay with that, as long as you have the company set up by the time that you're kind of ready to go full throttle with the idea. So one important thing I would say is never count yourself out of claiming VGTR. Never think, oh well, my project's not going to qualify. Please just come and speak to us. We obviously deal with HMRC all the time, so we can check with them to see if you'll be eligible, if we've got any questions. We deal with Department of Culture, Media and Sport all the time too. We also deal with games that aren't always kind of traditional video games. Obviously, the concept of what is a game is something that's constantly been wrestled with. We're constantly wrestling with it as well, so please just don't rule yourself out, and please come and talk to us. So, there is a minimum spend in the UK that you need to be spending. So, for VGTR, it needs to be 25%. So, if you're spending in other countries, as long as at least 25% of your game spend is in the UK or the EA for VGTR, then that's fine. Slightly different for the new system, the VGEC. It's 10%, so it's kind of a lower threshold. I mean, I imagine most of your spend would be in the UK anyway, if you're making a game here. So this, this is more kind of for the massive corporations, I think, that are maybe doing kind of bits of work different places. It needs to be 10% for the new system, and it's UK only. The next one is the game is intended for supply. So what it means that you're making a game for the general public. It's not just, for you and your friends. Anyone needs to be able to get access to it. It's interesting, it doesn't really matter how people get access to it. So I've certified games in museums before, very location-specific arcade games. As long as the general public can get access to it somehow, it can be free, it can be paid, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the things that wouldn't qualify here are generally if you're doing maybe some sort of educational game that you need to be signed up to a specific university for, or, a kind of internal training game for a company. You need to be working for that company to get it. So I would say, most games are made to be played by the public. Next, certified as British through the cultural test. So that's kind of the main thing we do. It sounds a bit scary, the cultural test, and I think it does put a lot of people off. But it's not that scary. I'll go through it very briefly because I could do a whole hour on the cultural test alone. But what I would say is if you're interested and you're looking to have your game certified, please just come and talk to me or drop me a line and I can kind of talk you through the cultural test. But sometimes it's easiest if we just have a meeting and then I say, okay, apply for these points in the cultural test, as opposed to you kind of trying to guess how your game would fit in with it. That works a bit better. Last one, well, I already kind of touched on this. Is it a game? So it doesn't need to be narrative-based, but it does need to be interactive, some sort of gameplay elements. I mean, as I said, this has always been discussed. What do we mean? That there has to be some sort of player agency, and something to do. As I said, it's very much an open question of what we can consider a game. So don't rule yourself out. If you're making something that's not a traditional video game, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't qualify. Just come and speak to us and we can talk to you about it. Next slide, please. So what isn't changing? So between the two systems, as I said, you need the UK company set up. That's the same for both. Again, these are all kind of things I've gone over. Still must be intended for supply to the general public. You have to qualify under the cultural test. So it's a pass mark of 16 points out of a possible 31. So there's actually multiple ways you can pass the test. I think there's a misconception, people, when they hear the cultural test, particularly it's called the British cultural test, they think that somehow their game has to have red home boxes or the Queen or something. But that's not the case at all. I mean, these slides are all very old now. I need to update them, but we're very, very busy. But these are all games that have passed the cultural test. So, you can make a game set anywhere. It just means that you wouldn't get points kind of for British characters or British. It doesn't matter. There's multiple ways you can get points. And they both have the 88% cap on expenditure. Okay, next slide. So what is changing? As I said, we're kind of in the middle of straddling them now, so you can kind of go under either. So this is maybe where you can think which one would work better for you. I would say that this is all very much HMRC stuff. It doesn't really affect what we do in the certification process. It is exactly the same, whichever one you're doing. The certificate that you get is issued by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and it doesn't say, this is VGTR, this is VGEC, it just says this is a British game, basically. So what is changing? I've already gone on the minimum expenditure. One thing is that there used to be a 1 million subcontracting cap. So again, this is maybe for kind of bigger companies, but if they were subcontracting out work, they couldn't claim over 1 million of that spend. That's going to be gone now. There's one about used or consumed. This is very much an HMRC thing. Basically, as long as that money is being spent in the UK, it's considered used or consumed in the UK. So if you're doing most of your development in the UK, you don't really consider this much. If it's something you're unsure of, please come and talk to me. Same with the connected party transactions. I mean, this is something new that's coming in, but again, it's for bigger companies to kind of stop them maybe pumping up costs if they're kind of doing work within another team that they've got that's connected to that bigger company. So there's just a new form if you were to do that. Okay, thanks. So this is the cultural test. This is the very, very most basic overview of it there is. As I said, I could do an hour talk on the cultural test itself, but I'll just kind of fly through this and you can kind of think about how would my game pass the test, basically. So you need to get 16 points. Doesn't really matter how you get the points. There might be different documents might need to provide us if you're going for certain points. But as long as you get to 16, it doesn't matter. I would also say when you're filling out the form, the submission form, if you get to 16 points, just stop. There's no point. You don't get kind of extra tax relief for getting full points. You're just kind of making more work for yourselves and us. More things to check. And also, if you're unsure of any points, don't worry too much about it. Once we look at your submission, if we disagree with anything and say, actually, we don't think you get these points, we'll always kind of advise you on the points that we think you should get instead. And we always look for the easiest way for you to pass. We're not here to be kind of gatekeepers and make it complicated. It's not going to serve you or us doing that. So I'll go over this very quickly because, like I said, I could go on for an hour just about this. So there's a total of 31 potential points. Pass mark is 16. You can see section A, you can actually pass in that alone. I'd say it's quite rare for games, but it does and can happen. So cultural content, what we mean by that is we look at the characters, we look at the setting, we look at the story, we look at the language. And it's kind of like a sliding scale on how many points you'll get. As I said, this is just kind of an overview. Section A is split into another 4 sections, A1, A2, A3, A4. If you look at our website, you can find all that information. And so depending on where the game is set, is the characters you'll be awarded. If it is in the UK or the EEA, so if you made a game that's all set in London, you would get full points. Character, setting, story, language. If you made a game that's set in space, that would be considered undetermined location. So we award points for what we call undetermined, and that means kind of fantasy settings. Generic, and I don't mean generic in a bad way, but if it's just in a forest, but it doesn't say where it is, then potentially you could get undetermined. And undetermined is actually only 1 point less than UK or EA setting. So for example, if you were making a game based in space, you would probably get 3 points for setting, 4 points for character, and 4 points for language. And then there's also points available for something we call British or EE underlying material. So that means if the game itself is from a creator who is British or European, then you can get points there too. So it's totally possible to pass in Section A, but I would say it's more common for people to get 15 for undetermined and then need 1 more point. Section B, this is the trickiest section. So it's the most subjective section. The other ones, obviously, if you're claiming British characters, we would just need to see a game design document, or if it's a narrative game, a kind of script, something that shows that the characters are British. One thing I'll point out is there's actually 2 kinds of certificates. You can get interim certificate and final. Interim is for games that are still in development. Final is for games that are complete. If you get an interim, it has a 3-year expiry date, so you can use it to claim every year as you're kind of spending money. So get an interim certificate, spend money for your first year, you can claim the 20% back on what you spent. If you get an interim, you will need to get a final at the end. The reason I'm bringing that up now is because for the cultural content, what we would check is different for interim or final. Interim, we would need to see, as I said, game design document, pitch docs are good, script. However, at final, we would just need a code to play the game, basically. Section B, tricky. So it's a lot more subjective. How Section B works is we basically have to make an argument to the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and they have to accept it. So it's not always the most straightforward. But you can get points for British heritage. So if the game is, set somewhere in the UK that's kind of significant importance, or if it's about a famous person from the UK, or a time period, you could get points there. Creativity, British creativity, if the game is doing something really new. So if, maybe it's mashing up genre, it's doing something new with tech, something like that. Diversity, so that's on screen or off screen. Obviously that's not limited to British because it wouldn't be very diverse if it was. But if your game has characters from underrepresented groups, in terms of gender, LGBT representation, ethnicity, anything like that, then you can get points. Same for off-screen. So if you've got key people in your team from underrepresented groups, you could potentially get a point there. I would say it's really common for people to get 15 in A and 1 in B and pass that way. The other two I'll go through quickly. Cultural hubs is all about where you spend the money. So you need to be spending at least 50% on certain disciplines. So 50% on programming in the UK, 50% of design in the UK, 50% of voice recording in the UK, if there is voice, or music, or sound recording. Then you can get points there. Last one, very straightforward, that's just about who's making it. As long as they're UK or EEA citizens or residents, then you can get points. So there's points for project lead, lead programmer, lead designer, lead artist, stuff like that, up to 8 points. And you can have the same person claim multiple points in that section. So you can see, it's actually quite easy to pass the test. It just sounds scarier than it is. Like I said, there's slightly different documents that we might need to see, depending on the points you claim, but we can always talk you through what you would need and at what stage you would need. Okay, so I'm not going to go into this too much because, to be honest, it's new to me too. So this is something that's brought in with VGEC. So there's actually 5 screen sector tax reliefs. I just work with video games, but within the wider team in the BFI, there's film, there's animation, there's high-end television, so that's kind of like prestige television, and kids TV. So they were all slightly different, and part of the reason that the games one is changing is to be more in line with the other ones, because it was always a bit of an outlier. So for example, it used to have EEA spend, so if you were outsourcing money to, Poland, for example, you could claim on that. You couldn't do that with any other screen sectors, so now they're kind of leveling the playing field, and that's being taken away. So this is another thing that existed in the other ones. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. It's more how HMRC calculate your spend, but as long as you're spending that money in the UK, that's what really matters. The example that we were told to give is, so for example, if you got a voice actor and they came from America, but they came here and you were doing the recording here, then it would count as used or consumed. So as long as it's being used here, the money, then that's what counts. As I said, this is very much getting into quite complicated HMRC territory, and it is very much a separate process. So we kind of do the certification bit to give you the certificate. This is starting to get into HMRC territory. But if you do have any questions about what you could claim, please just let me know and I can pass you on to HMRC. They've got a creative industries tax relief unit who are really, really helpful. This is the same, as I was saying. Again, this is maybe for bigger studios who have connected parties, so maybe they have different little studios, and they're outsourcing to another kind of connected studio. It's to stop them basically from saying, oh yeah, we charge 100 grand for something that actually probably should have only cost about 10, and then claiming that tax relief on it. That's what that's about. I mean, if you do have connected parties that you're kind of working with, that they're connected to the kind of parent company, it's just an extra form you need to fill in to declare. So I won't go into this too much. Again, it's like complicated HMRC stuff. Okay, next. So transition timeline. As I said, we're kind of like straddling both at the minute. So from the start of this year is when VGEC officially came in. So any development from the 1st of development, oh my god, 1st of January, you're able to claim under VGEC. But you don't have to, you can stay under VGTR if you want. As I said, there's pros and cons to both. So VGEC has a slight uplift, like 0.5%, but you can't claim EEA spend. So if you're just making it in the UK, probably is better to go under VGEC, to be honest. So developers can still claim VGTR until the 1st of April 2027. So it's quite a long kind of sunset period. I know there was quite a lot of discussion about the EEA spend thing being taken away. So kind of now's your chance until 2027 to do it. And as long as the game development began before the 1st of April 2025, you can stay under VGTR. From that point in 2027, VGTR is gone, so you'll have to go under VGEC no matter what. And as I said, VGEC can be claimed from the 1st of January. And you can do both. It's really up to you. You know, you can, again, this is when you go to HMRC. If you want to claim for a certain period under VGTR, fine. The rest, VGEC, absolutely fine. I would suggest you engage with an accountant for that part. Okay. Oh, I would say as well, the first part, coming to us for a certificate, you can completely do by yourself. I mean, it's a pain. Nobody really likes filling in forms, and it is filling in a form. But we're here to help you and make it kind of as easy as possible and as smooth and as painless as possible. So, yeah, how do you actually apply? So, if you go to our website, in funding and industry, you can find the section about applying for British certification and tax relief. Do you know what? Sometimes it's easier just to Google BFI tax relief and it comes up. As I said, we're happy to provide advice in person, on the phone, whatever kind of works for you. We're really happy to kind of talk through your game specifically and how it would pass the test, you know, what would work in terms of anything you would supply to us. Because again, with games, there's so many kind of questions. I'm sometimes envious of my colleagues who work in film because it's like they'll get a script, they get kind of movie magic budgets and schedules. We see all sorts because there's no kind of standardization in the games industry. So sometimes we accept things that quite odd. So this has come down now. It says that there was an 18 to 20 week turnaround because we were just so busy. But we've recently restructured. I'd say we're down to about 8 to 10 weeks now. However, if you do need your certificate quicker, so sometimes people will apply, but they've got the kind of year end coming up, just let us know and we can kind of try and, can't always promise it, but we'll certainly try and kind of prioritize it and make sure you get it in time. But as I said, interim is for games in development, final is for games that are complete. There's also questions around this, because if you're making a game that launches and then there's still significantly more content being released, like a live service game or something, where do you go? Do you go under interim? Do you go under final? Kind of up to you, but we would chat with you to decide which way would work best for you. We've got guidance notes. They're very dense, so don't be put off if you do read them. We can give you the abridged version. As I said, only fill in the relevant section. So there's a few supporting documents that we need to see. Slightly different depending on whether you're going for interim or final. So we need to see a budget if it's an interim. We need to see a final cost report if it's final. We can see what you actually spent. If it's interim, we understand it's just a kind of best estimate at the time you apply. We have a budget template you're welcome to use. You can add to it, you can subtract, whatever you want. Same schedule. For interim, we need to see what the plan is at the point you apply. We know what's going to change. Sometimes people get a bit hung up on dates and things, and I'll say it's fine. We know what's going to take. You don't need to worry too much. We're not going to hold you to it. And then, as I said, if it's final, we need a copy of the game. If it's interim, kind of just whatever you've got that gives us an idea of the game, the gameplay mechanics, the characters. So it can be game design document, it can be script if it's narrative game, it can be video if you've got video screenshots, just kind of anything you have there. The next one is for a very specific bit in the cultural test. So it's chain of title or underlying material. So I touched on it briefly if you're claiming the game is by a British or EA creator, then that's a document that we would need. But that's only relevant if you're claiming those points. Accountant's report, that's only required for final, so you don't need to do that for interim. And then also only if you're claiming certain points in the cultural test, which is mainly section C and D. Again, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Last thing, there's something called the statutory declaration that needs to be done. So you fill in the online submission, just send it off to us, it'll move through our system. But then you need to fill in a document that needs to be witnessed by a solicitor that basically just says everything in here is true. So obviously just because there could be quite a substantial amount of money at the end of it, it'd cut down on fraud. Any solicitor can do it. It should cost between £5 to £20. This is again something people can sometimes get hung up on and kind of like spend a long time getting done. It's fairly straightforward. You can do it quite quickly. So I don't think I've got loads of time to. I'm going to fly through very quickly.
Yeah, if you
yeah. So a different department in the BFI, we also have the UK Global Screen Fund. So as I said, this is a completely different department. But if you're interested, I can pass you on to my colleague Chris, who deals with the UK Global Screen Fund. So this is just some of the companies that have been awarded the funding in the past couple of years. Okay, so the overview. It's there specifically to support the development of UK games companies internationally. So it's a bit different. It's not project funding. You're not getting funded on a specific project. It's funding for you to expand your business internationally. So for example, when it first came in, I helped a little bit with the assessment. So it was things, if people are trying to break into the Chinese market or something like that, they maybe engage with a local Chinese company. That's just like one example. There's loads of ways that you could be said to be expanding internationally, but that's specifically what that's for. Okay, so yeah, I'll go through this really quickly. It's grants funding, as I said, it's for international business growth. The maximum you can get is about 200,000, but it starts by 50 to 200,000 over a total of 3 years. You're just in time. The application period is going to end on the 28th of June. So you've still got time if this sounds interesting to you to put it in. There's a lot of eligibility requirements. As I said, this isn't my department, so I'm not going to go into too much. But there's certain things like you need to be in the 3rd year of operation, you need to have published at least one game, there's some other things. This kind of replaces Creative Europe funding. I'm not sure if anyone kind of did that before. So it is specifically for narrative games, which is very different from VGTR because it's not a limited pot for VGTR and you can make anything really. This is very much that kind of funding. So Screen UK as well is related. It's more a promotional site to get your project kind of seen internationally. Again, it's my colleague Chris who deals with all this, but if you're interested about trying to get your kind of game out to a wider audience internationally, please let me know and I can put you in touch with him. As I said, there's like featurettes interviews and stuff like that that he is managing and putting on there just to try and get kind of new content flagged internationally. And that's it. So that's my email address. Drop me a line if you've got any questions. I'll be around here for a while again. And if you're interested, just come and talk to me and I can hopefully help you get some money. That's it.
Yes, we can do, it's a break now if you want to take a couple of questions.
Oh yeah, have you got any questions? Oh yeah, sorry, so what if you're doing more than one game at the same time? Yeah, that's absolutely fine. You can claim on multiple games, you just would need a separate certificate for each game, so it would need to be a separate submission for each one. But yeah. That's a good question. So is it general public? Yeah, it's like a general public release. That's what it means. So yeah, as long as the general public can get access to it somehow, that's all that really matters with the release stuff. Any others? So there is a cap on state aid, which is 50%. So that total of the VGTR VGEC, which is about 20%, whatever the grant money is, if it's UK government grant money, the total can't go over 50%. That's what it is. I think, is there another question?
This might be a silly question, but does money spent also include salaries and developers?
Yes, yeah. As long as, so there's something that HMRC work on which is called core spend. So as long as it's money to make the game, basically, you can claim on it. So salary's fine, and you just kind of have to structure that when you're actually claiming it, because the money has to flow through that company in order to claim it back. So you just have to structure the salaries so that they went through that. It's sometimes easier to think of what you can't claim on, and because it's very little, to be honest. It's mainly kind of like marketing, travel to events, stuff like that, because they would argue you don't need that to make the game. I mean, developers would argue that they do, but because it's not directly going on the development of the game, they wouldn't pay out on that. So I mean, I see loads of budgets. I would say, most of it is core spend, like 95%. With mobile games, sometimes we see huge marketing budgets just because of the nature of mobile games. But generally, most of the development is core spend. Yeah.
It's not for sole traders, right?
No, yeah, you need to have a limited company set up. Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Excellent. Well, round of applause for Stuart. Thank you very much, Stuart. So, really, really important, useful stuff there. And to that last question about sole traders, I wouldn't be intimidated about exploring what does setting up a limited company look like.
Yeah.
It isn't rocket science. Find an accountant. Again, I know accountants, solicitors, they always seem terrifying and like you're not going to have enough money. Have the conversation. It doesn't cost anything to ask. And I feel like a lot of people are spending thousands of pounds and hours of time making these amazing indie games and are missing out on the opportunity. Definitely, everybody. I know it's not the most. You want to make games. That's exciting. Filling in forms, as you said, isn't necessarily the most exciting part of it, but if it's going to enable you to get to the next step, then maybe it's worth doing. Okay, we're going to take a break now, and then we will be back.